Brothers and sisters, thanks for joining. Hey, I saw this article referred to in another one that I did earlier today, and it piqued my interest. So this is out of the Daily Mail, and it's from the 2nd of September, which is yesterday. Labor's big idea is ID cards for all. Blair wanted them years ago, and now, as Macron demands action, Starmer takes interest. All right, so I don't really know much about this, and I haven't thought much about it, so it'll be interesting to see how this article goes. And I haven't read it yet, so I don't know what it's all about. But I did see from the other article it has something to do with digital IDs for migrants. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm all for ID for some things, like physical ID to vote and things like that, to drive a car. I'm fine with that, things like that. But a digital ID to stop migrants, I'm not sure. And that's what I read in the other article. But that's it. So that's all I know. So let's go through this and let's see what I think of this at first blush without having thought about it too hard. Every person in Britain could be forced to sign up for a digital ID card after Emmanuel Macron demanded action to tackle the scourge of illegal working. Okay, so yeah, it's all about trying to catch people working in the country illegally. Now, I thought we all were supposed to have national insurance numbers already. Doesn't that do that? Maybe not. Let's keep reading. Sir Keir Starmer told the cabinet he would be exploring options around the concept as part of a wider package of reforms designed to make it harder for illegal migrants to live and work here. Now, I'm all for catching illegal migrants and deporting them, so that part's fine. Downing Street confirmed ministers are examining proposals for a digital ID scheme 15 years after the idea was abandoned following an outcry about the impact on civil liberties. Yeah, my worry is it's sort of like the online safety bill that they put in for children, right? Or that's how it was portrayed. If they put this in and it's to catch migrants, what else are they going to use it for? And are we okay with that? Because they're using the Online Safety Act to catch people talking bad online about migrants. So it's really, they're using it for any speech that the government doesn't like. And I'm not sure I'm a fan of that. And so what might they do with this one? So that's where my spidey sense starts going on this. So under one option, anyone applying for a new job would be required to produce their digital ID to demonstrate that they had a right to live and work in the UK. I'm actually okay with that if that's what it's being used for. And sorry about rubbing my face. My cat was just rubbing my face a minute ago. He's in my lap, so you might see him in a minute. Similar provisions could also be introduced for those moving to new accommodation, making a benefit claim, or accessing public services. Again, things like that I'm okay with, but what else are they going to do with it? Labor ruled out ID cards as recently as July. Wow, they changed their mind from 2 months ago? With Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds saying the idea was not our approach. So why did they change their mind? Sir Keir has been told by Mr. Macron to address pull factors attracting migrants to Britain in return to French help in stopping the boats. Okay, so this might be being done under the guise of France really wants it, or else they're not going to help us as much with the small boats. Okay, and I get it. Countries do need to compromise. Allies of the French president have warned UK's lax rules makes it an El Dorado for migrants. Whitehall sources said former PM Tony Blair has also continued to push the idea behind the scenes, and with Sir Keir coming under intense pressure to be seen to be acting on illegal migration, he is now down a U-turn. He's now down a U-turn? He's now done a U-turn. They got a misprint there. The PM's official spokesman told reporters that the government would always look at what works. Okay, so I see on the surface of it why they're doing it. Okay, so here's him meeting with Macron. Here's Tony Blair talking about ID cards. And here's a sample ID card. Tony Blair is wanting people to get. Asked if the idea could eventually mean compulsory ID cards for all, he said, "We are willing to look at what works when it comes to tackling illegal migration." Questioned about civil liberties row that ended the last bid to introduce compulsory ID cards, the spokesman said ministers believe the debate has changed since the last time we had this discussion, with people more relaxed about the idea of having to prove their identity online. Yeah, see, it's the boil the frog thing. As you lose more rights, it gets easier for them to take away more. The move came as Yvette Cooper claimed there was no alternative to Labor's plan for tackling the small boats crisis, which has seen an increase in channel crossings of almost 50% this year. The Home Secretary said Labor had spent its first year putting in place the foundations of fundamentally different approach, which she said would eventually pay off. She insisted that one in, one out deal to return a proportion of channel migrants of France was proceeding at a really rapid pace. But she could not guarantee the removals would begin this month. Ms. Cooper dismissed calls to order the immediate removal of those crossing illegally and to suspend the European Convention on Human Rights to speed up the process. She told BBC Radio 4, "This is not an alternative with the grand promise that fail because that just undermines trust." Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phillip hit back Yvette Cooper's claim that there is no alternative is simply untrue. Yeah, the way I see this, it's similar to Biden and Trump, right? Biden kept saying for years his hands were tied. There was nothing he could do without additional legislation. Trump came in, wrote some executive orders, and the illegal migration process just stopped, basically. He just stopped letting them in. We've had very little illegal migration since Trump got into office because he really just enforced existing laws, and that was good enough. There was plenty of manpower to stop migration. Now, the big problem is getting rid of them once they're here. That's a much bigger problem. But I would say Britain's got to take a hard approach on that and expedite sending them back when they're in the country illegal. Right now, it takes too long to do it. And we're seeing that in America, and Democrats are fighting Trump tooth and nail to stop him. But most Americans support sending back most of the migrants because they just let too many in. And I think it's the same in the UK. I imagine the majority in the UK, it's got to be a 70-30 or 80-20 issue where people want less migration than we're seeing right now, and less illegal migration for sure. We tabled a deportation bill a few weeks ago to end the Human Rights Act for immigration issues and immediately deported all illegal immigrants. But Labor blocked that, and last year they canceled the Rwanda deportation order just before it was due to start. There are alternative plans. Labor's just too weak to act on them. That's right. There are ways to do it. The Trump-Biden thing is the perfect example of how this could play out. The PM spokesman said Sir Keir has told the cabinet it was easy to understand the frustration people feel at the level of illegal crossings and the sight of asylum hotels in their communities, and that he would be chairing a ministerial meeting to consider how we can go further and faster to combat illegal crossings. Illegal crossings and more deportations. It's got to be both. This includes continuing to work with French authorities, cracking down on pull factors and illegal working, including the exploring options around digital ID, accelerating the closure of hotels, and looking at better forms of accommodation and driving progress, returning people with no right to be here. France issues a national ID card, but is not compulsory for people to carry at all times, and as other official documents are acceptable. Yeah, and there is no national U.S. ID either. They floated it every once in a while, but it's also always failed. So generally, people that drive are required to have a driver's license, and that serves as ID for most things. And then if you want to travel overseas, of course, you have to have a passport, but they're not required. And you can also get other forms of ID if required, even if you don't drive in the U.S. Ministers are examining similar digital ID systems in other countries, including Estonia, where citizens are given a state-issued email address for official communications and required to have a card carrying their picture and national ID number. Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden, who is leading work on the idea, visited the Baltic state at the weekend to study the scheme. On his return, he insisted it made sense to look at replacing the multiplicity of paper-based documents now used to verify ID, such as utility bills and driver's licenses. He added, the idea that you've got to prove who you say you are in order to work is a reasonable expectation. Yeah, I think so. France is talked about pull factors in the context of migration. If there are pull factors like that, we should deal with them. Mr. Blair pushed to introduce digital ID cards, but the scheme was scrapped by the incoming coalition government in 2010. Whitehall sources said the PM used an emergency meeting on immigration yesterday to urge ministers to pursue all options for tackling the crisis. Options discussed are said to have included stepping up efforts to secure more return deals, closing asylum hotels, tightening interpretation of the ECHR, and cracking down on illegal working. So there you have it. I think this was a good article as a starter to think about it. I haven't fully thought through this, but my initial reaction is we are living in a digital age and digital IDs are coming. You need a paper ID to do a lot of things, drive, buy alcohol, buy cigarettes. And so I think that this is not unreasonable, and standardizing it is not a bad idea. The problem is going to be the implementation. And what I mean by that is, what else will it be used for? Everything in this article looked reasonable to me. I would be for using a digital ID to get a job, to track migrants, to apply for benefits, things like that. My problem is it's going to be used for other things. And that's what we've got to watch out for. What other things is it acceptable for? You know, look at the Online Safety Act. That's a great example. So it was all about protecting kids. So this ID would help with the Online Safety Act, and you would know everyone's age based on that. But the problem is going to be, now that you've got everyone's digital details, it's just going to be that much easier to cut people off from websites you don't want them to see, information you don't want them to see. And I don't think that's a good idea. So I do think it's going to increase the police state, not narrow it. Again, look at the Online Safety Act. They said it was for one thing, but they're using it for a lot of other things that I don't agree with. And so that's the slippery slope. But I actually think there's nothing we can do to stop this. I think digital IDs are going to come to America. I think they're going to come to Europe. And there are some good uses for them. We just need to be careful about scope creep on it and what rights we allow the government to take from us with this. And I'm not a fan of us losing any more rights. We've lost plenty. Thanks, everyone. Let me know what you think. This one's interesting. I'll do follow-ups on this one as more things come out and as my thoughts on it evolve. But that's my first take. Tell me what you guys think. Hey, if you like this, like and subscribe. If you didn't like it, don't watch me or tell me what I got wrong. I'm all ears. Thanks. Bye.